The Passersby. Sometimes I think about how things could have been if we hadn't strayed from the trail trying to cut our way to the lake, if Jake hadn't stepped on that rock and twisted his ankle, if the rain had started an hour later. A chain of simple, stupid events that led us to the door of that house. We had been walking for hours through sheer mud, Jake limping and leaning on my shoulder while an icy, penetrating rain lashed down from the low sky. Hope had already run dry when, through a curtain of pines and mist, I saw a light. Not the flicker of a fire or a flashlight, but a steady, warm yellow light from a window. It was an old but solidly built log house, with a couple of other structures hinted at behind it. Civilization. Salvation. The door was opened by a woman in her 50s, her face etched with wrinkles but with kind eyes. Mabel. She gasped with pity at the sight of our soaked, trembling figures and ushered us inside, calling out to someone, "Lucas, come here, we have guests." They called themselves a community, a small family living away from the hustle, practicing crafts and hunting. There were about 12 of them, Mabel and her husband Lucas, their adult children with spouses, a couple of teenagers. They dried us off, fed us a thick steaming meat stew, gave Jake some ointment for his ankle. Their hospitality was so genuine, so all-encompassing, that Jake and I just exchanged grateful, bewildered glances. They gave us a small, clean room upstairs. "Sleep as long as you need," Mabel said, smiling. "You're in no hurry, right?" The next day the rain did not stop and Jake's ankle swelled even more. We were stuck, and we were grateful. They were kind, interesting, told stories about the forest, taught me to weave baskets from vine. But the first doubt visited me on the evening of the second day. We were sitting at the big table having dinner. The dish was meat again, a game stew, Lucas said. I asked what kind of game they had caught. A silence hung in the room for a second. Then Lucas smiled, but his eyes did not. "What the forest provides for us, dear. The forest is generous to those who know how to listen and give thanks." I dismissed my thoughts then, blaming fatigue and paranoia, but the seed was planted. Everything changed on the fourth night. I was awakened by a sound, a dull, rhythmic thumping coming from outside, from behind the house, and voices, not conversation but rather a chant, monotonous and ancient. I carefully approached the small window overlooking the yard. The rain had stopped, and in the light of the nearly full moon I saw them. They stood in a circle, all of them except the very young children. In the center, on a wide stump, lay a long shape wrapped in dark cloth, the shape of a person. I froze, unable to move. Lucas, holding what looked like a large knife or a short machete, raised it to the moon and uttered something in a language I did not know. The sound was guttural, crawling down my spine. Then he bent over and the cloth was unfolded. I did not see the face. I did not want to see it. But I saw the blade descend and I heard that sound. A squelching, wet, final sound. I crawled away from the window to the bed where Jake slept and shook so hard my teeth chattered. In the morning, pale and with trembling hands, I tried to tell him. He listened, frowned, and hugged me. "Claire, honey, you had a nightmare. We're in the middle of nowhere. They have their own rituals. Maybe they were just butchering a trophy, a deer or an elk. You saw it in the half-dark." He was so logical, so rational, and I so desperately wanted to believe him. But that belief shattered a week later. Our guest status began to thin. Hints were made that supplies were running low, that the winter would be harsh. The once warm gazes became appraising, weighing. And then, passing by the root cellar, I heard two of their men, Josh and Elijah, laughing. Said that tourist was too tough, ran too much, all the muscles were tense. But the current ones, Josh patted his stomach, look well kept, soft. Elijah laughed in response. Mabel says meat from despair is sweeter. They'll get good and desperate for us. I did not hear the rest. I ran to Jake and finally laid it all out for him. The sound, the words, the looks. This time he saw in my eyes not hysteria, but cold, petrified horror. We decided to run. At night. We had a compass, but no map of this part of the forest. Our chance was slim, but the chance of staying was zero. We slipped out of the house at dawn when sleep is deepest. For the first 2 hours, we walked almost at a run, stumbling over roots, scratching ourselves on branches. Hope began to flicker, and then we came out into a small clearing, and we saw Lucas. He was standing in the middle of it, calm as if waiting for a bus. He did not have a rifle in his hands, only that same long knife. "My children," he said softly, "where are you going? The forest is dangerous at night. Come back home." Jake stepped in front of me. "We are leaving, step aside." Lucas just shook his head with a sad smile, and then the others emerged from the trees, all of them. Mabel looked at us with sincere distress. "We've grown so fond of you," she said. "Why would you want to leave us?" It was not an attack. It was an encirclement. Slow, inexorable, Jake tried to break through. They pinned him to the ground with an unnatural, practiced ease. I screamed, fought, but strong hands bound me. No one was angry. They did it with focused, almost ritualistic care. They brought us back, not to our room, but to a shed behind the house. It smelled of damp earth, iron, and smoke. Several days passed, maybe a week. Time blurred. They fed us sparingly, but they fed us. They spoke to us like disobedient but loved children. And every day Lucas came and said the same thing. The forest gives us sustenance, but the forest demands gratitude. We only eat the passersby. Only those the forest itself leads to our doorstep. It is a sacred exchange. You must understand. You must accept. At first, Jake shouted, spat, tried to fight. Then he fell silent. And then, one evening, when Lucas brought us a bowl of bland broth, Jake looked at him not with hatred, but with a question. "And if one accepts, what then?" Lucas smiled like a teacher who had finally gotten a simple truth through to a dull student. "Then you become part of the cycle. You are no longer a guest. You become family. And family takes care of its own flesh and blood." I stared at Jake, not believing my ears. But in his eyes I saw not madness, but a cold, clear calculation. The calculation of survival. Morality is a luxury for the safe and well-fed. Here, it was ballast pulling you under. And he accepted. Not immediately, but he accepted. First, he just stopped resisting. Then he began to thank them for the food. Then he agreed to leave the shed and sit with them by the fire. I saw Mabel pat his shoulder affectionately. I saw him listen to their stories and nod. Something new appeared in his gaze when he looked at me. Not love, not pity. Detachment. I had become a reminder to him of who he was, and he was trying with all his might to stop being that person. And then it was my turn. They led me into the yard that evening. The circle, the moon, the stump, Lucas with the knife. Jake stood among them. He did not look me in the eyes. He looked at Lucas expectantly, like an acolyte ready for initiation. Lucas handed him the knife. "Family feeds family, my son. It is an act of love, of gratitude. The flesh of the passerby gives strength to those who remain." Jake took the knife. His hand did not tremble. He walked up to me. In his eyes, I searched for a spark of the guy I went on this hike with, the one who laughed, kissed me, promised to protect me. There was nothing there. Only a flat, focused resolve to survive at any cost. He was not killing his love. He was killing a stranger, a passing woman, so his own skin would remain intact. His morality had decomposed completely, turning into fuel for this final, monstrous act. He raised the knife, and the last thing I heard before the blade came down was his voice, quiet and firm, addressed no longer to me, but to them, to his new family. Thank you for giving me a chance to stay." They were right. Meat from despair really is the sweetest, I know. I felt it leaving, and he remained a passerby.